Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. Switch gears. And I do want to talk about just a wild story that really kind of took over the internet on Thursday afternoon. And it was just like the most quintessential sports story that you could have in 2022. First of all, it involved John Calipari, the Kentucky basketball coach. He said something. The Kentucky football coach gets mad about it and kind of responds on social media. But why it was so crazy was because it was just such a quintessential 2022 story, as I just said. You had the coach replying on social media. You had people coming to the defense of Coach Mark Stoops. And then most importantly, you had, because it is the SEC, you had 13 other fan bases chiming in and kind of sharing their own thoughts. So let's get into it. But it kind of centers around, I think, first of all, Kentucky is one of many college basketball teams right now. They are taking a foreign tour. College basketball teams are allowed to go overseas once every 4 years. Kentucky is taking advantage of that. And Kentucky right now is in the Bahamas. Well, on Thursday before their second game, John Calipari did have a media availability in which he talked about a lot of different things. But one of the things he brought up was that he believes it is time for Kentucky basketball to get a new practice facility. And this is something, by the way, I will say in defense of Calipari, I have heard a little bit about behind the scenes. This thing was built in 2007. Obviously, there's been upgrades along the way. But since then, and John Calipari mentioned this, he said, look, you know, we've built baseball a new facility, track has a new facility, football has $200 million in investment, and I do think that it is time for us to go ahead and get ourselves a new facility as well. He actually brought up something that I thought was kind of interesting, the idea of attaching a Kentucky basketball kind of history museum to this facility. Kind of, you know, the fans can come, they can learn about the program, the basketball team can practice there, all that good stuff. But that's not where it gets interesting, though. Where it gets interesting, though, is that in the midst of having this conversation, and like I said, I thought he said a lot of very interesting things. He did say something very, very, very interesting that certainly made headlines. He was talking again about a new practice facility, and this was the line that got everybody, including the football coach Mark Stoops, fired up. He said, the reason is this is a basketball school. It's always been that. Alabama's a football school, so is Georgia. I mean, they are. No disrespect to our football team. I hope they win 10 games and go to bowls. At the end of the day, that makes my job easier and it makes the job of all of us easier. But this is a basketball school, and so we need to keep moving in that direction and keep doing what we're doing. On the one hand, you could certainly perceive it as a little bit of an innocuous comment. Doesn't really mean much. But one person that did not feel that way was Kentucky football coach Mark Stoops. Mark Stoops saw the quote, immediately goes on social media, and here is what Mark Stoops said. Basketball school, I thought we competed in the SEC, hashtag 4 straight postseason wins. His lead assistant, Vince Marrow, said, I think we're pretty good at football too. He tweeted this. Love what UK coach Stoops has done here at the University of Kentucky. Go Big Blue. And, former players were kind of fired up, too, and current players as well. Vito Tisdale, who is currently a defensive back on this year's team, he dropped this one. He has since deleted it. But, I mean, you talk about a wild thing for a player to say. He said, check this out. Y'all crap. We run the Bluegrass. Y'all boys went out in the first round to St. Peter's. And then Max Duffy, a former punter, said, completely out of the blue question, but has the Kentucky football team ever lost to St. Peter's? Oh, my goodness. That is right. We had a back and forth between the University of Kentucky football coach and the University of Kentucky basketball coach, and you had Kentucky football players jumping in and basically calling their basketball program trash and referencing St. Peter's the worst loss in program history. So this story is crazy. I want to break it down. I want to get into a lot of different angles. And most importantly, what I would say is this. I know you come to this show for big, strong, bold opinions. You know, take a side and stick to it. Criticize one guy, praise the other. This is one where, I'm not going to do it. It's a weird one where I see both sides of the story. I see what Calipari was trying to say. I see why he could have said it better. I see why Mark Stoops is mad. But boy, oh boy, is this an interesting story. So first of all, what I would say is it was really interesting because probably about, a month to 6 weeks ago, I actually had lunch with somebody pretty close to kind of the University of Kentucky athletics ecosystem, right? It wasn't a coach. It wasn't anything like that, but somebody who knows what's going on behind the scenes there. And I think I just said it a minute ago, but he kind of mentioned that the Kentucky basketball team's facilities, they were falling a little bit behind. Now, it's not a delay. The building's not going to blow away with a strong wind or anything like that. But when you're competing at the highest level, when you're competing against Kansas for recruits and Duke for recruits and whoever, fill in the blank schools that are constantly upgrading their facilities, that are constantly making sure that they have the best of the best, this guy told me that Kentucky's athletics, football facility or basketball facility was lacking a little bit. And ironically, and it was interesting that he said this, he actually gave a little bit of credit to John Calipari and basically confirmed what Calipari said on Thursday. Now, this guy wasn't a shill for Calipari. He wasn't defending Calipari. He didn't have Stoops' back. But he basically said, look, probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago when things were really rolling, Cal made some concessions. There was money needed for other projects. He kind of said, we're Kentucky basketball. We'll be okay. And then all of a sudden you have a couple weird years, you don't make a couple Final Fours, people are frustrated, and now on top of being able to use all of that against you, they're using the Kentucky facility stuff against you as well when they're recruiting against you. And so I understand where Cal is coming from because this is kind of in the Kentucky world, my understanding, at least among kind of the administrators and the big donors and all that good stuff, this is a real thing, and I think a lot of people really do feel like there is a need for it. What I would also say is that I do understand those of you that are going to sit there and say, yeah, but John Calipari could have done this in a way where he didn't drag football into it and belittle football in the process. And to that part, I actually agree. I do think there was a way where John Calipari could say, this is desperate times. We really do need a new facility. The story apparently was that there was a leaky roof as they were getting ready to make this trip. They had to cancel practice, something like that. There was a way where he could say, man, we really do need a new facility. We need to start getting moving on this. But there was a way to do it. And by the way, there was a way to do it involving the other teams without belittling them. There's a way to say it in a way of, look, baseball got theirs and track got theirs and tennis got theirs and football got theirs. It's time for us to get theirs. But instead, he said, we're a basketball school. I hope the football team wins 10 games, but we got to make sure that we get taken care of as well. And that is where I kind of go to the Mark Stoops side of things. And I will tell you this. I do see Mark Stoops' side and where he would get frustrated on this. I don't think Calipari was totally wrong. I do think Kentucky is a basketball school, but I do understand where Mark Stoops would be frustrated. First of all, as a head coach, you just got to stand up for your players, right? You got to stand up for your players because you got to let them know that you have their back. But more importantly, I'm sure it's something that those players heard when they were recruited. And I'm sure it's something that Mark Stoops has been battling publicly and privately pretty much since he took the Kentucky job. I'm guessing that on more than one occasion, when he's recruiting against whoever, Florida, Florida State, LSU, Alabama, Georgia, recruits have probably been told, don't go to Kentucky. That's a basketball school. They don't care about football there. Now, I know, if you're an educated fan listening to the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, you know that Kentucky gets 60, 65, 68,000 people at Commonwealth Stadium or Kroger Stadium or whatever the heck they're calling it now. They get that every Saturday. But I do think this is something that Mark Stoops has probably been fighting against every single day of his career at Kentucky, now spanning a decade. And he's probably sitting there saying, Cal, you're not helping the cause here. I got to go into a kid's home, and he's hearing it from Florida State, and he's hearing it from Florida, and he's hearing it from Tennessee, and he's hearing it from Georgia. Now he's got to hear it from the basketball coach as well? That's not cool, coach. I'm going to fight for us, and I'm going to let everybody know, hey, we play in the SEC, and we've won 4 straight bowl games. Beyond that, what I would also say, beyond just the recruiting implications and we're fighting this fight, I do think it's starting to become like a little bit belittling. Yes, Kentucky's a basketball school. I'm not arguing that. But what I would argue is that this school has now won 10 games in 2 of the last 4 years, and I think they're actually fighting for something bigger. Like the way that John Calipari, the way that I could see this quote coming off is that it's the big bad basketball coach kind of patting the little football coach on the head saying, good job, you made us so proud, you're doing so good, good job, good effort. And Mark Stoops is like, wait a second now. We've won 10 games 2 of the last 4 years. We're trying to build a program that can compete at the highest level. We're not there yet. We're not beating Georgia tomorrow. But our goal isn't just to get to a bowl game. Our goal isn't even to win 10 games. Our goal is to get to Atlanta and play for an SEC championship. Our goal is to win an SEC championship. Our goal is to go to a college football playoff. And so that's where I definitely do feel like I understand where Mark Stoops is coming from. It really does feel like the basketball coach, he's kind of, just, you're doing so good. I'm so proud of you. And you get to a bowl game. Mark Stoops is like, we've been in bowl games, man. We've won bowl games. We're trying to do bigger stuff here. And so I do get where he is frustrated. A couple more thoughts before we get out of here. First of all, what I would say, it's wild to me because this is just another example of what a weird back and forth summer that it has been for John Calipari. Early on in the summer, I really kind of thought, and I've said it on this show many times, I thought he had a lot of PRLs throughout the summer. He lost one of his top assistants, Jay Lucas, to Duke, and he had this weird quote about, he came to me and told me, and he thought I was going to be mad, but I support everything he does. It's like, again, little belittling, a little out of touch, a little whatever. Wasn't good. He obviously had those comments during NIL where he had his assistant coach or his director of ops or whatever, tweeting out, we don't do NIL guarantees and blah, 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 and this and that. And on the one hand, I get it. On the other hand, I didn't think it was a good look. We've talked about it many times. The player at the time, Baylor Shireman, I can tell you definitively he didn't choose the school that he chose strictly because of NIL. So I just thought that was a bad look as well. But what was interesting was it felt like the last probably month or so, things were starting to move back in the direction of pro Calipari. Obviously did incredible work, and would never belittle this part, but incredible work raising millions of dollars for all of the, the situation in Eastern Kentucky. That was incredible. That was one of the great stories in sports and great humanitarian stories that we've seen all summer long in sports, in the world of sports. Beyond that, schedule Gonzaga. Now, it's not a true home and home, as I discussed on this show a few days ago, but you get Gonzaga at Rupp Arena, and that was a big win publicly for him. And so it kind of sucks that after he's finally gotten back in everybody's good graces, everybody's finally put St. Peter's behind him, that we're now in a situation where here we go again. Cal sort of put his foot in his mouth. He doesn't look good, and now he's got to go back and apologize. I would also say that on top of that, I think it's disappointing just texting with some Kentucky fans because this just feels like a time where it's not even a time. It's just there's no reason both programs can't coexist, right? Everybody is excited about basketball. They're in the Bahamas. They're playing the summer tour. They have the defending National Player of the Year, the reigning National Player of the Year coming back. But football is also supposed to be really good too. Not only does basketball have the National Player of the Year coming back, football has maybe the number one pick in the draft next year in Will Levis. And so it was an exciting time for both teams, and to see this internal infighting is just weird, and I think it's frustrating for Kentucky fans. So that is the John Calipari, Mark Stoops story. Just a crazy, crazy, crazy story. I don't know what else to say. As I record here, there has been no official formal public apology. We know that it's coming, but at the end of the day, it's just it's weird. I do see what John Calipari was trying to say. I don't think he meant it in a derogatory or an insulting way, but I do understand why Mark Stoops was frustrated. Like I said, if I'm trying to build a team that can compete for SEC East titles and go to Atlanta, the last thing I need is my basketball coach saying, hey, you guys over there, you're doing all right, but this is really about us and about our basketball program. So I understand both sides, kind of a crazy story, but just a weird, wild, bizarre story. That's what I want to do. I'm going to take a quick break. No more infighting between Calipari and Mark Stoops. When I come back, do want to play what has quickly become America's favorite segment, Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. A lot of stuff to discuss. Aaron Right, Aaron Wrong. Discuss everything next. I will be right back.